Hello YouTube, this is going to be a video on how to make the 3x3 Slim. So this is a pretty easy puzzle to make. On a scale from 1 to 10, I'd say this would be about a 2 in terms of difficulty. And it looks pretty awesome. You can also, from this, extend these layers out by half and then bandage this. Then you have a 2x2x3. Or 3x3x2. You can make it 3x3x1 by bandaging. You can cut using epoxy sculpt these two sides to make everything look like this, and various other things. So even though this is a pretty simple puzzle to make, you could definitely branch off into some slightly more difficult projects using this as kind of like the base puzzle. So what are we going to need to make it? You'll need a Xingqiao Wind. I'm sure a lot of people got the Xingqiao Wind, and I don't know if anybody has this as their actual main, so I'm sure a few people will have these lying around and willing to sacrifice. Complete, not with 2 pieces missing, that's just my bad. You'll need roughly 100 playing cards, or something, or a miter box and razor saw, but that's the easier alternative. You'll need a hacksaw, an X-Acto knife, super glue, screwdriver, something to cut bolts, cut screws with, so I'm just using that little section. Optional, some silicone lube. I'll get into why that's really important in some section, but it's not 100% necessary. And of course, also optional but very recommended is like a set of stickers, so you can make your puzzle look really nice. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to do a very basic overview of what needs to be done in this mod. The first thing that we're going to do is stack up a certain amount of cards so they are as tall as from here to here on an edge piece of the 3x3. Once you do that, we're going to be splitting these in half. Into equal piles. Once we have equal piles, we'll then be putting the hacksaw over the two. Then we remove the cap that's on every Xingqiao Aurora piece. Then what we're going to do is cut this piece in half. And then once the cut has been made, see where the line is, we're then going to put the cap back on. And that'll result in thin, already nicely rounded caps. Then we repeat the same rough process for the corners. For the centers, what we're going to do remove the cap and unscrew it. Then we're going to use the same process to cut the center piece. We're then going to discard the spring and cut roughly 3 or 4, maybe 5 millimeters of threads off of the spring, and then some other modifications to the center cap and the center piece. So let's begin. Start with the edge pieces. So the first thing you want to do is set your edge piece down on the table like this, and you want to build a stack of cards, just regular playing cards, until they reach just maybe slightly under the, like just absolute hair under being just as tall. Then you split the stack in half, and then place your blade on here and put your fingers on the stacks, but not in the middle, because that could bow the blade. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to make it so when you make the cut, it'll be exactly half way, because that's half of the stack. Sorry if that's kind of hard to explain, but if you think about it, you'll get it. So now, you remove the cap. You do not want to cut with the cap. Now, by removing the cap, the blade, because it doesn't have the height of the cap on the ground, will cut slightly more to the left, in this case, than the middle. You may want to, before you make the cut, keep the cap in and just lightly kind of scrape it. Then, you check to see how close to the center that is. And in my case, despite that not being the center of the sticker, it is the center of the piece. You can remove the sticker if you want. I'm just going to leave it. So now, when we remove the cap, it'll cut farther to the left. But when we put the cap back on, that will compensate. Trying to get this cap off. There we go. So basically, holding like this, you just want to move the piece, not the blade. Make sure the cards don't move around too much. Once you get to this point, in which the piece is well cut into, you can just cut it by hand because it's already going straight. You should be left with something like this. If you want, you can use a little bit of sandpaper, which, by the way, is also something you need. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but oh well. Should be left with something looking like this. Again, if you want, you can scratch away the little bits of roughness. I don't really recommend going over it with sandpaper because that'll affect the height. So just kind of, just take your fingers, just clean it up. It's looking good. Now you take the cap. And you just, it doesn't really want to go 100%. So it's going to be a tight fit, but you just, there we go. You're left with a half proportional piece pretty easily, and then you can kind of just scrape away at it a little bit, get it nice and good looking, and there you go. You've created an edge. You want to create 8 of these, 4 on the top and 4 for the bottom, and you want to leave 4 edges alone. So don't do this to every edge, just 4 of them. Now for the corners, it's a very similar process. And we already have the height cards set, so we don't need to change those. Again, just remove the cap. Sometimes these will be a little hard. Hopefully, for some reason, you didn't glue these down. Now, I am not sure, but this might be able to work on the Xingqiao Aurora, but I can't confirm that. Because the caps, despite having the rounds, may still work even if they're indented in. So, again, similar process. Make sure to take out the cap before you start cutting, and start cutting. You might be able to use a miter box and get a pretty precise cut as well. This allows for the height differential of the cap to be calculated a lot more easily. So once you got, again, up until about this point, make sure your cut's looking pretty straight and true, and it is. There we go. So now you get the corner. And again, you don't want to just clear a little bit of the debris. More or less. Now you just throw your cap on there. And whoops, sorry, that might have been a little out of frame. And there you go. You have a half proportional pieces. You got an edge and you got a corner. And you make 8 of these, 8 of these. And there you go. Very, very simple. The centerpiece is by far the hardest portion of this mod. You have to first cut it with the jig that we've created, which we'll do now. It's a little bit harder to hold than the other ones. Make sure your cards don't slip out of place. They're really slipping from me right now. Whoops! Again, totally make sure to take off the cap of this before you do it, because then if you don't, you gotta sand, which sucks. I think that's gotten to the point. Yep. There we go. So now we're left with, I like to call a thin centerpiece. Okay, so I'm gonna take away a little bit of debris. Now, the observant puzzle builder would realize pretty quickly that a screw is no longer able to sit within this, and it's not really what we generally used before. So now you can see there's a little bit of gap. It sticks out a little bit, which is a problem, and that means that if we put a cap on, we'll remove some plastic from this cap, and we're going to have to super glue them. If I put the cap on, it wouldn't be able to go on all the way. So what we have to do is take our trusty X-Acto knife and just start carving away a little bit of plastic, and it does not take a lot. Just a little bit of plastic from the inside of this ring here. And just kind of carve it away. Doesn't have to be too precise. Try to keep it as smooth as possible. Really just kind of, yeah. Just cut it a little tiny bit of plastic. If you don't have silicone lube, try to keep this as smooth as possible. Okay, try that. So just put it in. I'm looking here and it's still sticking out just a hair, so we're gonna keep going a little bit. And again, we're just gonna scrape away some more plastic. Just, it shouldn't take, you don't want to get rid of too much, so just be careful. You don't go crazy. And just, yeah. If you have a drill bit, that might also work. But I do not have access to this kind of technology, and I'm trying to keep this as easy to obtain materials to make this as possible. Okay. So now, we put the screw in, and oh yeah, nice. It's flush. You can feel here it doesn't stick out, it actually sticks in a little bit. So, we now have this, it is not catching. Okay, we're good. This piece is now done, so we'll put this aside. Now, we've got to focus on the screw. And the screw is a little bit too long now. So, we gotta cut it. Cut away about a little more than that. You definitely don't want to cut too far, but maybe there. Right around there, you're cutting away just a little bit. You definitely don't want to cut away too many threads. These are really not sharp, and yeah. It's a little bit useless, the thing I'm using, but it to some extent gets job done. Oh boy. Okay. Just one more time. Nope. Okay. Cutting, cutting, cutting. Be careful that your screw does not fly off. I found it, luckily. And you can see I still left some threads, but it's now shorter, so it's not going to bump into anything when it screws into the core. Speaking of the core, we can take the rest of our puzzle here and begin some kind of since we already know that this piece is totally fine. If you already made all your pieces, then it's a good time to just start placing them here, kind of like this, and go all the way around and finish the layer. If not, then you can use some unmodified pieces. I think you just need right around two edges, I think, would be sufficient. So you kind of put your centerpiece where it needs to go, and you stick your screw where it needs to go, and you start tightening. And it might take a little bit of getting it started because the threads at the beginning might be a little screwed, but no, it'll eventually start going at its own rate. And whoops, we're almost done. And this is basically, since we're not going to be able to tension this. Oh yes, right as you're getting to the very end here, you want to lube this sucker up just a little bit. Not very much, not very precise, just a little bit, just to keep it from ever trying to come loose. So, just keep tightening, and then we're going to get to the point where it's starting to, like, you know, actually tighten up. And we can feel here, okay, these are definitely not loose. You do not want it to be loose. You can't, it doesn't have a spring anymore. So, I'd say, yeah, that's good. Now, I recommend doing all your edges and all your corners first, and then the last step will be to do one side, and then I'd recommend doing one side at a time. So, do 4, and then the center, and then 4, and then 4, and then the center. So then when you put the center in, you don't need to ever worry about, like, popping out pieces and stuff to get them to assemble it. This assembles exactly like a 3x3, so I'm not going to really show that. So anyways, once you got, you know, a decent tension, again, you don't want it to be too tight, you don't want it to be too loose, so I feel that's pretty good. Now, we got to start working on this, and this is probably the most tedious and kind of annoying task. You got to take your sandpaper and just start sanding the piece down to the edge, basically, so it looks like something like this. So it should look something like this. Now there's still going to be a little bit of a hollow, kind of a lip on the inside. But as long as the outer lip has been destroyed, you're looking good. And I know I haven't done the entire layer. I don't plan on making an entire one of these, or another one for this tutorial. I would have if I had enough pieces, but I don't. So, just bear with me here. You would put in all of your pieces, make sure it's all tensioned and nice, and then you would take a little bit of super glue and wouldn't recommend just gluing it on like insane, just in case you have to take it apart. So maybe just on 2 opposite sides, just enough. and you align it. So I just kind of aligned it with my fingers. These two edges will align it on these axes, and yeah, hold that down for a second, and there you go. There you have it. You have a 3x3 Slim. So again, that would just be like gluing on this cap, and then you've just made all these pieces, and you're done. So very simple, very basic, and has a lot of potential to be other fun puzzles. So if you want to turn this into a 2x2x3, which may be I'm considering making a tutorial on expanding upon what we learned in this one. The whole card trick is a good one for other projects, like the 2x2x3 out of the mini 3x3 that comes in a couple times. You can keep these if you want to make one of the 3x3x2s. Keep these pieces, because then you can just glue them on and you're already set. So yes, thank you for watching.